Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our May webinar on repurposing food waste. I am Sandy Soot, Secretary of the Renewable Sydney Central Branch. A warm welcome to you all, even you are signing in locally from the Sydney region, elsewhere in Australia, or maybe even from overseas. It's very exciting to be engaged with so many people tonight here at our Renew event. To begin, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which the Sydney Central Branch operates, the Gadigal clan of the Eora Nation. Also, the traditional owners from the parts of our country and other lands. We acknowledge their leaders, past, present, and emerging. And we also acknowledge their sustainable stewardship of the country over many decades. Before we begin, some brief announcements about upcoming events. So in July, we are organizing an in-person talk and tour of an apartment where MRA recently unveiled an industrial first build using their interior materials made from waste glass and waste clothing, a collaborative effort between MRA and UNSW Smart Centre. And also this year, Sustainable House Day will be held on a new date. It's now on the 17th of October, and will be held both in person and virtually. From 21st of September, we present 4 weeks of interactive online sessions, diving deep into a wide range of sustainability topics and featuring both Sustainable House Day homeowners and subject matter experts. Application for homeowners are now open, and now on our website on the sustainablehouseday.com. If you need more info, message us on the chat channel. And I hope some of you had dinner before our event. Tonight, I cooked a really lovely meal and put the food scrap into my food scrap recycling bin. I'm not sure whether you can see it. And then that's the topic for tonight. We now have the pleasure of welcoming 2 speakers who will tell us a bit more about what we can do to repurpose our food waste. Firstly, we will have Jodie Larsen from City of Sydney, and then we will have Phil Woods from Sydney Water to talk about how they transform our food waste into more meaningful resources. So our first speaker, Jodie, is the project coordinator of Sydney of City Food Waste Recycling Project. Jodie has more than 15 years experience working in the waste and environment sector in both the private and public sector, including 7 years in waste management with MRA Consulting Group. She joined the resource recovery team at City of Sydney in 2018. Afterwards, we will have Phil Woods to join us to talk about Sydney Water's waste to energy projects. After Jodie's talk, we will have 5 minutes Q&A. And if we have more questions, we can have another further Q&A after Phil's talk. If you have any technical issues during the event, please use the chat function to get assistance from the host. And you can also put your questions in the Q&A chat channel, and we will go through some of the questions at the end of each presentation. Without further ado, let's welcome Jodie.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm just going to share my screen. So thank you everyone for having me tonight. As Sandy said, my name's Jodie Larsen and I'm the project coordinator of the City of Sydney's Food Scraps Recycling Trial. And I'm just going to take you through our trial journey so far. Okay, so why are we running a trial? So as many of you would probably know, food waste comprises a significant proportion of our residential red lid rubbish bin. In the city, it's around 35% of the rubbish bin. And that is a problem because when food goes to landfill, of course, it generates methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. and source separation of food scraps for recovery delivers much better environmental outcomes. So the trial itself is an initiative of our current waste strategy. And it's one of a suite of actions that we're taking on to help us achieve our 90% diversion from landfill by 2030 target. And the results of the trial will help us to shape future food organics recycling programs in the local government area. So the objectives of the trial are pretty straightforward. They are, of course, to increase source separation and recovery of food scraps, to employ processing technologies that deliver high environmental benefits, to test the demand for and the feasibility of a food scraps recycling service for residents, and also to provide our customers or residents with a quality curbside service that meets their needs. So what is the trial? It's an opt-in residential food waste collection and recycling service. The project commenced phase 1 commenced at the end of July 2019. And it ran for just about 14 months. And at the end of that 14 months, we had 100 apartment buildings and 300 houses involved. Which meant the service was available to more than 5,000 households. At the end of September last year, we started phase 2 of the trial, and our targets for phase 2 are to have 250 apartment buildings involved and 1,000 single houses involved. And that would mean that the service will be available to just over 21,000 households in the city, which would be about 17% of all households in the city area. So we were fortunate enough to be awarded some grant monies to support the trial of the project from the New South Wales Government Waste Less Recycle More initiative. Not all of the trial elements are supported by the grant funding. It's quite specific what the grant will and won't fund, but as you can see there on the screen, it's things like communication and education activities, costs for the bins and the kitchen caddies and the caddy liner bags, and other things like waste audits and other evaluation activities, as well as a small portion of the collection costs and the food waste processing costs. So I'm just going to take you through how we've implemented the project right from the start. So how did we recruit the trial participants? So way back in 2018, we called for expressions of interest from houses and apartment buildings to opt into the project. And we received almost 2,700 applications for it. What we did with those applications then is that we mapped them in our GIS program, and from there we selected 320 houses and 100 apartment buildings for phase 1 of the trial, based mostly on property location for the purposes of operational efficiency. But we also looked at service feasibility, so whether a property would have space to store the bins and so on. And we also required, and still do require, a commitment from apartment building strata committees to participate in the project. The properties that were not selected for phase 1 were put on a wait list for our phase 2, and now we have since offered places in phase 2 to those that were on that wait list. So this is just a very simple schematic of how it all works. So basically the food scraps are separated at home and put into a kitchen caddy, and then when the kitchen caddy is full, the food is taken down to the maroon lid bin, food scraps bin, down in, if it's in an apartment, in the main bin storage area, or if you're in a house, you've got your own bin. Then we come along and collect the food, and we take it to an organics processing facility, which happens to be Earth Power, and then the food gets processed into green energy or electricity, and then also high quality fertiliser. So in terms of the equipment and materials that we give our participants, we make it really easy to take part and separate your food scraps in the home. We provide all households with a 7-litre kitchen caddy and a one-off supply of 200 compostable caddy liner bags. We provide also a couple of brochures, a how-to household information guide, and also a separate brochure on the compostable bags, because they are a critical element for the service, and it's important that people don't use plastic, of course. We give houses a 60-litre small mobile bin, and we give apartment buildings a 120-litre mobile bin on a share basis of 1 bin for every 15 units. Sorry, 50 units, I beg your pardon. Apartment buildings also receive a whole bunch of other support from us, including postcards, posters. We have a new resident letter. We have bin signage for the bin room, a poster for building staff, so for information for cleaners and building managers, and we also have a brochure also for building champions and building managers, and a full resource page now also on our website. The collection service is actually managed by the city, by our in-house cleansing and waste operations team. We collect from apartment buildings twice per week, and we do that to make sure we don't have any issues with odour and pests. And we service houses once a week. And that team also carries out all of the other operational logistical things, such as delivery of the kitchen caddies and bins, and repairs of bins and replacement and so on. Bin contamination is an important part. Managing bin contamination is an important part of the service. So we have some really simple but effective procedures in place to try and keep contamination at bay. Every single bin that is collected by our team is inspected for contamination via a quick visual on the top layer of the bin. If our staff find things that shouldn't be in there and it's safe to do so, they remove it and they put it in the nearest garbage bin. If it's not safe to do so, they reject the bin, and we send a garbage collection truck to come and get the material in the bin. And our processing facility also conducts ad hoc contamination inspections on the whole load that we deliver to the site. So that seems to be working quite well. Food waste processing. So the city currently has a contract with the Earth Power Anaerobic digestion facility in Cronulla in Western Sydney for processing of our food scraps. And the outputs of that process at Earth Power are electricity and fertiliser, as I mentioned before. But currently Earth Power are closed for maintenance and upgrades. And until they reopen, we are using Earth Power as like a transfer station, if you like, and the food scraps are being on-sent to an alternate facility and they're being composted. So a very important part of this service has been fostering the necessary behaviour change in households, because currently a food organics collection service or a food and garden organics collection service isn't a common service that's available in Sydney households. So it was really important that we do a lot of work on communication and education. And one of the first things we did was develop a really comprehensive engagement and education plan to encourage both participation and also foster the necessary behaviour change. And that plan covered all 3 stages of the project, from pre-commencement, so at the expression of interest stage and recruitment stage of trial participants, through to service implementation, so basic information on how the service works, what you can and can't put in your bin and so on, and then ongoing messaging, so giving feedback to our participants on the results of the trial and how it's all going, and trying to maintain people's engagement and keep participation up, and also try and increase it. So we use 5 key touch points in apartment buildings to engage with them. Apartment buildings are notoriously tricky when it comes to recycling services. They're often prone to high contamination and low participation. So we've really put a lot of work and thought into how we engage with our apartment buildings. And we do 5 particular things, and they are: we need strata committee approval to for a building to take part in the trial. We do a site assessment with a nominated building contact to look at the bin systems already in place in the trial and make sure we can set the food scraps bins up appropriately so that the system will work. We require residents in the buildings to register online to get a kitchen caddy and liner bags. We also do for medium to large buildings, so those with over 50 apartments in them, we give them an on-site information session. And we're also running an apartment building support program to sort of follow up with those buildings that are on board and up and running. So I'm just going to sort of race through these so that I'm not spending too much time, burning too much time on them. But the strata committee approval is, I'm sure we're all aware of what that involves, but it's important because it raises awareness of the scheme with the strata manager and the strata committee. So we're starting at that sort of, I guess, top level, and we're engaging with them and letting them know about the service and how it should work right from the get-go. And it calls for a commitment from those people to for a building to actively take part. And so far we've managed to get 157 buildings give us strata approval for the trial. The site assessment involves us turning up on site to inspect the bin storage areas, to confirm where the bins are collected, to also tap into the building's communication channels. So whether they use things like they have an intranet broadcasting system, or whether they have a Facebook page, or whether they, what sort of communication systems they use, or whether they just have notice boards in the foyer and so on and so forth. We need to know so that we can tailor our communications about the trial to what they have, and it also is an opportunity for us to answer questions with the building contact face to face, which is obviously gives us an opportunity to directly inform and dispel any misconceptions, and it helps us start to build a relationship with the building and the building contact, and building that trust with them. So far, we've done 152 site assessments at different buildings. Online registration for caddies. So, as I mentioned, residents, if they want to take part in the trial, they must register online to take part and order their kitchen caddy and liner bags. And we've found that this is good because caddies and bags are only supplied to those who are actually motivated to register. So it's a significant cost savings. Particularly the bags are a really expensive part of the system. The registration process also enables us to collect email addresses, which has enabled us to do a lot of digital communication. So we have an e-newsletter that we send out quarterly to all our participants, and we've done lots of online surveys and things for evaluation. So that's been really helpful. And of course, the registration process provides us a measurement of participation rate in apartment buildings. So that has also been good because that's otherwise quite difficult to measure. So far we've had 4,126 apartments register for the trial. The on-site information sessions, they're a 2-hour session that we do on-site, as I mentioned, with buildings that have over 50 apartments in them. We hold them on Saturday mornings and on Thursday nights. We find this is the best time to try and catch people at home, or when they're passing through to either come out of the building or go home. They involve 1 or 2 staff with a very simple display stall with samples of the bins and the caddies and the liners and brochures and so on. And also we have tablets for registration to get a caddy. And obviously this is a really important and valuable time for residents to have their questions answered face to face. and it achieves 2 objectives of awareness raising and education. So far, we've conducted 55 information sessions, and we've engaged with over 1,400 residents and had 470 apartments register at the information sessions for the trial. The apartment building support program is just a simple phone call that we're doing and following up with our participating buildings to find out how they're going with the trial and whether they need any further support. So whether they need anything, if they've got any issues, we need to help them troubleshoot something and arrange us to go out for another site visit, or whether they need any further collateral, education collateral or posters or so on and so forth. So that is something we've only more recently started, and finding it a bit hard to resource that, but it's an important thing. So just getting on to the results of the trial. So these results are right up to last Friday. We're now sitting at just over 500 tonnes of food collected and recycled, which is a nice milestone, that 500 tonnes. Our contamination rate is really good. It's just sitting at 1%, which is excellent. We have 1,015 houses participating, and the participation rate there is, we're assuming, approximately 100%, give or take. We have 146 apartment buildings that are actively participating in the trial, and within those buildings there's 11,385 households. So we have some really big buildings, but I think our biggest building is 830 units or complex, and the smallest strata scheme that we have is a building with 2 units, so it goes from one extreme to the next. The participation rate in apartment buildings is 36%. So the results in terms of environmental benefits. So we've saved over 492 cubic metres of landfill space, which is more than 2,240 litre wheelie garbage bins. We've avoided the equivalent of 856 tonnes of carbon dioxide, which is equal to taking 205 cars off the road permanently. So prior to Earth Power going offline, we generated over 64,000 kilowatts of energy, which was enough to power 11 households in our area for a year. And we'd also created 7.9 tonne of fertiliser for soil nourishment in gardens and parks. And now, of course, we're currently producing compost. We've done, as I mentioned, we've done a whole series of online surveys with our participants. These graphs show a question that we asked in 2 surveys with our phase 1 and phase 2 participants, asking whether they thought the service was easy to use. And you can see here that well over 90% of respondents in both surveys, the pattern's very similar, are saying that the service is easy to very easy to use, which is good feedback. This survey that we did in April 2020, we asked how likely are you to continue to use the service on an ongoing basis, and as you can see, 93% said that they're extremely likely to continue using it. This question here was a little bit more specific, asking select one thing that you think could be changed or improved to make the service better. And we had the most common or frequent response was 30% of respondents said they had no suggested changes, so they were happy with it the way it was. But then the next 2 most frequent responses were in relation to the caddy liner bags. So 20% said they want easier access to the bags because, as I mentioned, we're only giving a one-off supply, and others asked for better quality or stronger caddy liner bags. This question here, so we surveyed our household participants, and we also surveyed our building managers and champions within our apartment buildings, and we asked the question in 3 separate surveys, the same question: are you happy with the way the food scrap service is working in your building? As you can see there, in each survey over 90% of our building managers and champions said that they were very happy with the way the service is working in their building, which is also good feedback. So what's next for the trial? So we're continuing phase 2 of the trial and expanding it to more apartment buildings, and we're actually calling at the moment for additional apartment buildings to express their interest in the trial. We're looking for around another 100 buildings. So within phase 2, we're wanting to test the scalability of our current operating systems and refine those and increase our operational efficiency. We're also trying to, like with running it for a further 12 months, ensure that we understand the true ongoing running mode in terms of costs and the contamination and all of those things. We're also continuing our communication with our participants to try and maintain the current levels of engagement, and we're implementing a bunch of strategies to increase participation and capture rates of food. We're sort of doing some mini trials and mini pilots within the trial, if you like. So we're about to start a mini pilot of giving kitchen caddies to unregistered apartments in 4 buildings to see what the effect that has on food waste volumes. And we're doing a bunch of other communication campaigns as well. And of course, we're continuing on an ongoing basis to collect trial feedback and results data. And the other thing that we've just started to look towards is a proposal for a full-scale rollout of the service. So we're currently working towards delivering to Council by the end of this year a full evaluation report on the trial results and business cases for various options for a full-scale rollout of the service. And if Council approves these, the full rollout will commence from mid next year. So this is just a little schematic on the numbers. So we are at this stage looking at continuing the service as an opt-in service, and at the moment, as you can see, that middle circle says down the bottom, in May 2021, we've got over 12,300 households that the service is available in. And then if we go to the full service by June 2025, we expect to have around 800 apartment buildings and 14,500 odd houses involved, which would be around 75,000 households. And that is it. Do we have any questions?
Thank you. Thanks, Jodie. That's really informative, like getting to know what the Sydney is doing for the food waste trial. We do have 3 questions so far from the attendees. So the first one is from Rob. Rob asks, why is a bin liner bag is essential, especially for houses?
Well, I probably shouldn't have framed it that way. I guess it's not, and we don't. On our website, we do actually suggest that you can go nude, if you like. That's what we call it in our kitchen caddy. So you can use it unlined, or you can line it with newspaper, or you can choose to use a bag. It's up to you. But for apartment buildings, some apartment buildings insist on that their residents use the bags, because if they're using no bags, it does make it the bins quite dirty, and then of course it makes it quite difficult for the cleaners to clean the bins. But also in terms of just handling of the food scraps, we find that if people don't have the convenience of the bag in a high-rise building, they will not be inclined or motivated to bring the food waste down to the recycling bin that's usually in the basement. That's the model that we're mostly working with. So yeah, people really need that bag to be motivated to bring it down and not have to handle it, if you like. I hope that answers that.
Yeah, that really answered the question. I used to have a little caddy. I used to live in the West as well. They are doing the trial session, And then the bean bag is really hard to use, and probably I didn't know how to use that properly, and it always breaks, and then I end up just getting the food waste nude, as what Jodie said.
It's definitely the best option, yeah, for houses, but for the apartment buildings, it's an important element.
Yep, thanks, Jodie. The second question is from Mary. She asked, can I put the pit of an avocado in the food scrap recycling bin? Or
Yes,
maybe you can talk a little bit more about what we can put and what we can't put in there.
Yeah, sure. So you can put any cooked or raw food, leftovers, plate scrapings and so on. So any fruit and veggie peelings, mouldy off food. You can put dairy. You can even put oil. You can put any meats and small bones, no large bones. You can put seafood and no hard seafood shells. So you can put like prawn heads and tails and so on in, but no oyster shells. You can put avocado stones, no problem. And you can also put food soiled paper, so baking paper, soiled pizza boxes, paper towel, food soiled paper towel, that sort of thing. And we also can take a small percentage of compostable packaging.
Yeah, thank you. We do have quite a number of questions here. We might answer some of them later on after Phil's talk, but I will take one last question for Jodie. That is from Quits. So Quits asks, what is the rough cost of operating this system? Does the power generation and compost outputs provide significant income to cover the costs?
So that's a double barrel. So at the moment, we've calculated that the cost per household for the trial is just over $140 per year per household for service available households. And we have done some modelling for in preparation for the full-scale rollout that suggests that we can probably nearly halve that when we move to a full scale, if we move to a full scale. So it's not outlandishly expensive. And with the income with regard to the products that the system generates, at the moment with Earth Power, they have full ownership over all of that. So they sell the electricity back to the grid for their own profit, and also the fertiliser gets on-sold to a commercial fertiliser companies, and it gets blended with their product and so on-sold to farms and gardens and so on.
Yep, thanks, Jodie. So just looking at the time, we might want to move on to our next talk, and we do have more time later on after Phil's talk, so we can answer your questions, or if we can't, we might collect the questions and then email back to all our attendees' questions, if that's okay with Jodie. Sure, thank you. Yep, thank you. All right, now let's move on to our second talk. So it's the talk from Phil Woods from Sydney Water. I have had the pleasure working with Phil Woods in the last year, and Phil has been with Sydney Water for 14 years and is a thought leader in the areas of circular economy, resource recovery, energy management, and emission reduction. His main areas of interest are in energy resource recovery from organic waste, such as anaerobic digestion, and the co-digestion of food waste with sewage sludge. He recently led the establishment of a partnership project with Gemini, where in an Australian first, biomethane will be produced from biogas and injected into the gas network. That sounds really interesting. And let's welcome Phil. The floor is yours, Phil.
Hear me now, hang on. Am I coming through? I can't see
Yep.
my audio. Yep. Oh, good.
Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Sandy. And you know a lot about that biomethane project because you helped me work on it last year. So, yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. If you're wondering why I've got a jacket on, I'm down here in Hobart tonight. Actually, I'm Sydney based, obviously working at Sydney Water, but I've just got a night down here and it's freezing down here. So, and the house is still warming up. Got the fire on, but just jumping into things. So, quick intro to Sydney Water, and I think most of you would be Sydney based, so you've you know a bit about Sydney Water. We're Australia's largest water and wastewater provider. A lot of our customers don't realise that we do wastewater as well as water, and very few of our customers know that we produce renewable energy from wastewater. I'm doing a lot of work with our comms people to really try and build an understanding of that. But there's a lot of stats in this slide. I'm not going to go through them all. You'll have a copy of this in the presentation recording, so you can have a look at that. But big numbers with Sydney Water: 500 billion litres of water we move a year, and almost 500 billion litres of wastewater that we receive and treat from about 2 million properties from Sydney, the Illawarra and the Blue Mountains. We do a lot of renewable energy generation. We have three ways that we produce renewable energy. Hydropower, we produce that from pressure reductions and gravity flows in our systems. Solar, although we're very small in the solar space, we do have some much bigger targets to get up into the megawatts, but we're only at kilowatts of capacity at the moment. But that will move up fairly quickly, or it is moving up fairly quickly this year and in the coming years. And the big one for discussion tonight is biogas. We produce biogas from wastewater treatment at 8 of our wastewater treatment plants, and we have about 10 megawatts of installed capacity. That's enough when they're running at full capacity to generate enough power for about 8 to 10,000 houses, the equivalent of 8 to 10,000 houses. And you can see there in that pie chart on the right that biogas is by far our biggest source of renewable energy generation. And the value of the energy to us is about $12 million a year. That's very valuable to Sydney Water. The water business is a very, very energy intensive business. We're in the top about 60 or 70 energy users in the country, and certainly in the top few within New South Wales, because water is heavy and it takes a lot of energy to move it around. So that the renewable energy that we can generate is a big cost saver for our business, and we generate up to about 20% of our own our total electricity demand across the water and wastewater business. The engine for that, if you like, is anaerobic digestion, and Jodie mentioned it before briefly in her presentation. But just so you know, I'm sure a lot of you have heard of anaerobic digestion and know something about it. But just in case, I mean, anaerobic digester is like, it's similar to compost, but it's in a closed tank, closed off to oxygen supply, limited oxygen supply. So bugs in there are breaking down the organic waste, which traditionally for us has been wastewater solids that we capture through the sewer system, breaks that down and produces a biogas, which is about 60% methane, about 40% carbon dioxide, and some traces of other gases. From that, we produce biogas and we produce biosolids. So the biogas, as I say, is a very large proportion of our total renewable energy generation at Sydney Water. The biosolids all go to reuse in agriculture, 100% reuse in agriculture. About 2/3 of it goes straight into farms, and 1/3 of it the slightly lesser quality biosolids is composted first before it goes into agriculture. Now, as I say, traditionally, all that we've put into our digesters is wastewater solids, what comes down the sewer. What I've been on about for a number of years at Sydney Water and others is that, hey, our anaerobic digestion or our wastewater treatment business is really, it's a waste business. You know, you could take off the water bit and say that we're a waste business, and certainly with the anaerobic digestion, that there is the potential for us to take other organic wastes and digest them alongside the wastewater solids, and that's the co-digestion that I'm not sure if Jodie mentioned that, but that's what we talk about here, is that we digest organic or food waste with wastewater solids to produce more biogas and more biosolids and maximize the resource recovery from that food waste. So what we've been doing in that space, I'll go through a few examples of what we've been doing. One of the big ones was a food waste co-digestion trial at Cronulla. That commenced back in 2016. It was receiving up to about 20 tonnes of pulped fruit and vegetable waste and some beverage waste each day. So this was commercial waste. Originally a company called Pulp Master, who have, and there's a picture of one of their devices there. Fruit and vegetable shop in this case throws the waste into this device, which is like a big top loader washing machine. It pulps the waste, adds enough water to make it pumpable, puts it into a holding tank. That waste was picked up by a truck and sent down. Over 4,500 tonnes of waste was taken, has been taken to date. Significant increase in biogas and electricity generation. We have an 830 kilowatt generator, biogas or co-generator at Cronulla treatment plant, and we're seeing up to a 20% increase in our gas production at the peak of the waste, at the peak volumes of waste. We got some funding for that and some recognition through the New South Wales Green Globe Awards. The project is on hold at the moment. You know, that was a trial project. We've learned a lot from it. Unfortunately, we've had to have it on hold because of some other issues at the plant, not caused by the food waste, but the food waste was exacerbating with our digesters. Another of the learnings with this project was the digesters weren't in the best of health going into this, and we're having to sort those problems out before we can get the food waste started again. Interestingly, noting one of the questions that Jodie had before about avocado seeds, that was one of the things that caused us a problem at one point at Cronulla, where we didn't have, we got a load of waste with avocado seeds, and that wasn't expected coming through Pulp Master, and avocado seed shouldn't get through it, but they did somehow, and we didn't have sufficient pre-processing in place, and they clogged up our lines, and ultimately we put in a macerator at our end as well as a backup, so that we didn't have issues from things like avocado seeds. But lots of really good learnings. Next steps, I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but developing a broader business plan to roll this out across a number of our sites. But as I say, I'll come back to that in a sec. The other big project for us in this space was a Shellharbour research facility that we built, working with the University of Wollongong, funded through the Australian Research Council. Whereas Cronulla was a trial in our commercial digesters, the operational digesters, at Shellharbour we built two purpose-built 1,000 litre digesters, which are quite big, but hey, our digesters are normally in the millions of litres size, so still relatively small. And we tested various organic materials in a controlled environment. So we had one as a control, just taking sewage sludge, and the other one a mixture of sewage sludge and various organic wastes. Looking at the gas production, looking at the impact on the biosolids, to really understand the opportunities and identify the risks that could come with digesters and developed a model to estimate outcomes from new waste streams given certain characteristics. One of the interesting things there in that title there, beer was great. You can throw beer and digester, co-digest that. Big increase in biogas. Red wine, not good. Red wine's better drunk by the looks of it. We had some really good quality red wine that was excess, or I'm not sure what was wrong with the product, but it soured the digesters and actually reduced our gas output. Something that's been of interest and really, I mean, Jodie sort of covered this, but I'll mention it briefly anyway. But the challenge for us, or the opportunity in using our facilities to take food waste and take lots of food waste at our treatment plants comes with the challenge of getting waste streams in a relatively clean stream, low contamination, and it's been flagged as a potential challenge in multi-unit dwellings, although City of Sydney are showing that they're overcoming that separating waste in multi-unit dwellings can be a challenge. So there have been some things that we've been keen to look at, and we often get questions about what about incinerators and putting waste down the sewer, and whether that's an option. We've been really interested in looking at that, but in the context of maybe a hybrid solution for multi-unit dwellings, where there's a simple sink-based solution, but where the waste is collected centrally in the apartment block in the basement and settled out, with the thicker solid waste being put into a truck and trucked to the treatment plant, and the low strength liquid stream going down the sewer. But nothing progressed on there yet, and certainly, as I'll show you in a second, I'm very keen to see source separation as the way, as a viable and workable solution. And that's because of research like this. Now this graph is showing the total greenhouse gas emissions for a given unit of food waste processed by various options. And you'll see that the one on the graph, the bar on the left there, is for landfill, and clearly that's the worst option. You're using a lot of energy to collect the waste, to take it to the landfill, and you're having methane emissions, so high emissions there. The other ones, which are progressively, or somewhat progressively better, a mixed materials recovery facility where you do some mechanical separation of your red bin into organic and inorganic waste, produces a better outcome. There's certainly a lot better outcome than landfill. Compost, much better again. But then you look at where you involve a wastewater treatment plant, and if you do it via the sewer, so that's the incinerator, the in-sink food disposal unit, the outcome there is certainly a lot better than landfill, but nowhere near as good as compost. You look here though, if you can source separate it and truck it directly to a wastewater treatment plant, you get an actual reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. The reason you get a reduction is because you've avoided all of the emissions from landfill, the methane emissions from landfill, so that's one saving. But then you're turning that waste into renewable energy, into biogas, which displaces fossil fuel electricity. So you get a double benefit, and that's how you can get a negative emissions profile there. And that's including the trucking of waste to the treatment plant. This is a North American study done a few years ago. There was one Australian study that we were partly involved with, has similar results, maybe not quite as marked. You know, there's certainly assumptions that go in behind this, but it's very clear that trucking, source separating and trucking waste to a wastewater treatment plant, or to an earth power in the example of City of Sydney, is by far the best greenhouse gas emissions outcome. Now, something that I've heard in conferences waste conferences in Sydney in past years is, well, we don't have any anaerobic digesters in Sydney. There's only one, Earth Power, that the City of Sydney are sending their waste to. It's, well, hang on. No, we have Sydney Water has 14, soon to be 15, and that number will probably grow even further as we convert some of our aerobic facilities to anaerobic. And we have them spread from Shellharbour up to Warriewood and out west to Riverston, and St Mary's is that star there that's in the process of conversion and upgrading as a centralised gas production hub, essentially, or a solids processing hub. 8 of these sites have biogas cogen engines. They're the 8 biggest ones. The ones that don't have them are simply not big enough. They don't have enough scale to make an engine justifiable on a cost basis. And one of those will soon be exporting biomethane to the gas network. I'm just checking the time. I better move along, or I'm almost done. Yeah, the biomethane project, I mean, that is not directly related to food waste at the moment, but what it does is give us an outlet to make use of additional gas that we produce. Some of our treatment plants, like our Malabar treatment plant, when all of its cogen engines were running, we were producing 90% of the electricity needed to run the plant. And when we start to export the electricity, it becomes less financially viable. So having another option in biomethane is a real bonus for us, and ensures that, you know, we continue to get financial value for producing biogas, which is important for doing things like food waste and trying to maximise the resource recovery from waste. An Australian first project. It's not uncommon overseas, but Australian first, so it's a big deal here. We've got $6 million in ARENA funding. I won't dwell too much on this, but my role now in Sydney Water is, I was in the energy space. Now it's focused on circular economy, of which energy is a big part. And we're developing a strategic plan for the business to really make or to embrace the circular economy, as our corporate strategy says or commits us to. One of the really exciting opportunities we're working on there is for Western Sydney, and a new wastewater treatment plant we're building in Western Sydney, where for the Aerotropolis, essentially, in that area, where we're looking at an integrated water, waste and energy facility, something like this, where we have you have homes there in that circle at the top. We've got an integrated intensive production hub, as it's called, or a glass house farming facility, and then the Sydney Water parts of a water factory down the bottom, a bioenergy plant as well, which is the anaerobic digestion, where there's a flow of wastes and resources around all of those. Waste flowing from the homes, from the production hub, to the water factory, to the bioenergy plant, recycled water flowing back to the production hub, recycled water to rivers, biosolids going to agriculture. So a real circular economy, iconic project, I really think, for the city and for Australia. And that's something that will come to fruition. We're trying to bring to fruition as design at the moment. The wastewater treatment plant needs to be operating by about 2025. So it's a few years before this would be operating, but really exciting project, real challenge to get everybody together and all the stakeholders together. It's aspirational, but very achievable. There's other projects, whether they be in Australia and Yarra Valley Water, New Zealand, and a biopark in the Netherlands. There's some in Denmark as well. So we certainly take inspiration from some other projects to move that forward. So I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I've gone a little bit over, but thank you.
Thanks, Phil. It's really exciting to get to know that we have the biomethane project, and potentially that would benefit a lot of us living in Sydney. And we have a question from Robert. I think it might be a comment, but it's also a question regarding the Plum Master. So Robert's question is, if councils had some units that liquefy waste like Plum Master, then can they be the local collection points for people to bring food waste to be inspected and liquefied?
Yeah, it's I hadn't thought of that. That's an interesting idea. I like it. Yeah, it's. I mean, as I said in my presentation, the real challenge. We know that we can turn this waste into useful resource in bioenergy and biosolids for agriculture. The challenge is getting that clean waste stream, and yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, it would be good if we have more shops like Plum Master exist. Don't know how they operate and what's their business model, but yeah, it would be good to see that. The next question is from Jeanette. She asked, do you test for toxins before solids go out to farms? Is there any danger to our agricultural soils?
Yeah, we certainly test for toxins, and Sydney has, in terms of toxins, there's various things we need to test for and satisfy in terms of volatile organics that cause odors, and then sort of heavy metals and things like that that could get into our agricultural soils. That's been an issue in some other states, places like Melbourne, where they've had to stockpile their biosolids for long periods because it's been contaminated and they haven't been able to put it in anywhere. Sydney Water has a very successful trade waste scheme with all of our major commercial customers. So there's a lot of testing and controls around what the commercial customers put into the sewer, and that's where the toxins potentially get in. It's not from households. So much. We meet all of the limits there for toxins. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to put it to farms. And it's something that if we can't put it to farms, it costs us a lot more then. And it's such a waste in that it could have to go to landfill if it fails that. So that's certainly in our interests, as well as farmers' interests, obviously, to ensure we continue to meet those limits.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, good to know that. Also, there's a question from Graham. That's for Jodie. Is the fertiliser or compost would be used back within the community so they can make it as like more circular, or is it just so commercially?
At the moment, it's just sold commercially, but we are looking into the possibility of doing a trial of using the fertiliser on one of our parks. And we'd sort of started planning that, but COVID came along and it kind of got put on hold. But it's something that we're looking into and will eventually definitely do. We also have to look at the composition of the fertiliser and make sure it's perfectly safe for, a public use like that. So that's kind of where we got to with it, but it's definitely in the works.
It's something we're looking at too. We have to take our biosolids out of the Sydney catchment, but if we can achieve what's called a grade A biosolid, that would allow us to reuse the solids in an urban environment.
Interesting. And the next question is from Chris. I think Chris asked a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Why aren't City of Sydney using Sydney Water's facility to do their trial projects?
If I can answer that, because Jodie, well, you rang me about a year ago, I reckon, and it was the basic gist of the conversation was, well, you know, we've got our trial up and going. When are you going to be able to take our waste?
That's right.
And I've said that many times internally, Jodie, to other people, but that's what we're working towards. There's a fair bit of investment required to get the scale to do this or to have a new facility like the Earth Power facility that exists, and we're working towards that. You know, we've done a lot of the research, the Shellharbour research, the experience and the learnings we got from the commercial trial at Cronulla. So we're building those plans to write. You know, ultimately our vision, you know, within 10 years is to be able to take food waste at all of our anaerobic digestion plants, and it's coming soon. We're just not quite there yet.
Yeah, would be good, like if Sydney Water can take on those food waste and then become a more circular economy business.
Yep.
So
It would be.
yeah, looking forward to it. The next question, it's a bit discussion. I saw two questions coming in. It's for Jodie. That's for what happened if the renters they took the caddy and then the bin liner as well. What can the owners or like the next tenants do to get the caddies replaced?
They can register online for a caddy and liner bags. That's fine. We have probably not communicated that process very well to our trial participants, but we're about to start. We've got a bit of a campaign coming up where we're going to be telling everybody that they should be leaving their caddy and any leftover bags behind if they're moving out of their apartment, and or house. So yeah. But if you move in and you don't, if your building's in the trial and you need a caddy and bags, you can register online to get them.
Thank you. We might want to put a link later on after this event, and then so people can register.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. So one more question is from Cherry. So she asked, if you are using wastewater from the inner wall, does that mean that it wouldn't be available if ever needed to make green hydrogen? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully get the question, but I think I do. In terms of what you ask about there, Cherry, is another area that I'm working in terms of hydrogen and looking at what the opportunities are for Sydney Water to collaborate and work in the hydrogen space. We very much believe that green hydrogen should not come from potable water supply, that it shouldn't be taken away from precious potable water, that it should be coming from recycled water. And we are there's a few project opportunities we're looking at the moment to work with others to use recycled wastewater for green hydrogen production.
That's exciting. Maybe we can get you
and
to talk.
Illawarra is one of those places, so yeah.
Where we will get you to come back again if Sydney Water is going to make green hydrogen.
Yeah, maybe not just yet, but
yeah, exciting time. So I might just ask one last question. It's a common thread, people asking whether they can put egg cartons in the food recycling bin, or like whether some cauliflower cardboard box can be put in the food recycling bin. What's your opinion on that, Jodie?
With any kind of cardboard that's not plastic coated, it should go in the yellow lid recycling bin. In preference, if an egg carton had a bit of egg residue on it, it would probably be better in the food scraps bin. That would be okay as well.
Yeah, I guess that's what the yellow bin is for.
That's right, clean cardboard. Yeah.
Okay, I think we answered all the questions. Thank you so much, Phil and Jodie, and we get to know a bit more about what we can do with our food waste. And thank you very much for both of your time. So,
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
yeah, thank you both.